Hey, buddy, how you doing, man?
Doing awesome. Just driving in between locations. So
Awesome. You got an appointment or something?
got to pick some
Awesome.
stuff up at a past client's house.
Oh, cool, cool. It was real funny. We were talking a little while ago, and I was thinking about like one of the topics to talk about today, and I was just thinking that I get a lot of buyers that are asking me, and I know you have the same thing. Is like they're always wondering like what leverage do they have in today's market? Like that's a great question. Like what leverage does a buyer have in today's market, Steve?
So much has changed since the middle of June when interest rates went up. Um, Prior to the middle of June, the only option you had was how much money can I throw at it, and should I put any contingencies on my offer, and how long should the seller stay in for like a free rent back? That was it. That was the conversation.
No kidding. I totally forgot about that, but you're right, right? Yeah.
So it was those three things.
Yeah, yeah. You're getting buyers would call you and say, "When am I supposed to move in? I closed like last month, right? Yeah. And I have to pay the mortgage, and they live there, right?
Right?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, it was everything, and sellers got everything.
They had everything. And now, how I've been educating my buyers is like, look, every single listing has a story. Let me find out the story because every seller's motivation is different right now. Very few of the properties that'll be sitting out there are going to be stratospheric pricing if the people are serious. But even if something is bang on for pricing right now and it doesn't move in a week or two, the need of a seller can be or turn into like real desperation.
Yeah,
And you're seeing sellers provide credits to closing costs or buying down interest rate, mortgage points. You're seeing a lot of things happen right now, and sellers are having to accommodate. So what is the market showing us? The market's showing us that the buyers have finally flipped the switch. They're sick and tired and fed up of what they had to go through for 2.5 years. And because the rates are still a little bit higher and not everything is super favorable, and the media keeps talking about, hey, maybe it will be a recession or supply chain issues, inflation, all those things,
all that stuff. Yeah,
right? There's a lot of smoke signals for people going, oh, warning, warning, warning everywhere. So sellers, I mean, if you want to be a holdout, that's fine, but that likely means your level of need or desperation to sell the house isn't substantial. And a buyer can discover that quickly, right? By even an initial conversation with a listing agent. But then there's the other conversations where we need to sell now, period.
yeah.
Have to, have to, have to. And that just gives you bargaining power. So it's not necessarily what leverage does a buyer have right now. It's what leverage does a buyer have right now based on certain criteria of a seller. And if a
Mm.
seller has a need or a must, there's a lot of bargaining power.
So the way I hear that is like you can look at every house like a different deal, right? And then like this
Correct.
house has certain criteria, like these people need to move to Minnesota. They already bought a house. This guy's retiring. They're getting a divorce. Whatever that thing is, that's going to tell you what the need is, and then how do we get together and meet that need for everybody so that the buyers benefit and the sellers benefit. Everybody benefits.
So I'm not going to use the word benefit, but everything you
Okay.
set up to the word benefit. And the reason
Uh
I
huh.
don't want to use the word benefit is because buyers never benefited when it was an escalating market, right? So sellers might not be happy about the deal. So that's not the benefit about both parties being okay with the transaction. It's necessity, right? What's the level of necessity on the seller's end? And if they just have to get the deal done, they probably won't like the deal, but they'll tolerate it. Just like
Yeah.
buyers didn't like the deal, but they had to tolerate it in an escalating market. So
Hmm. I
I
still
don't
like
think
the
that.
word. I get what you're saying, and I hear what you're saying. So if I was a seller, let's say a year ago, then I was the one getting all. I was getting everything. I was getting everything I wanted. I got to live in my house, for an extra 30, 40, 50 days after we close escrow. Not paying a single thing. I get my cash. I can go find what I want to do. I get the balls in my court. Now I got to move to Minnesota. I got to move to Chicago. I got to move to New York. I got to move to Florida, Texas, wherever. I got to move somewhere. I already bought a house, or the house being built, or some scenario. I got to get to work there. So I need to move. I'm not the dictator of the market. So the buyer comes and says, "Hey, I'm going to give you this." I just basically got to look at my numbers and go, I can get to Florida with these numbers versus hold out. Is that what you're
Right.
saying?
It's not necessarily about holdout. Sometimes sellers are having to sell for less than they calculated.
Well, no, I'm saying if I don't get what I want, I can hold out. Like if I don't get this, I'm going to have to hold out. Like if I don't take this, I'm going to have to hold out.
But for some sellers, they can't. Right.
That's what I'm saying. So they can't. Yeah.
Right. For some, they can't. For some, they can.
Yeah.
But that to me is what's dictating more of what a buyer can get away with right now is really on the seller's desperation, needs, necessity, right? What does that look like? So all of those things will
did an open house. I remember we did an open house. I think it was October, maybe November before Thanksgiving. I think it was October, and it was a house, and the house was vacant. They already had moved out. They'd moved wherever they had moved to across the country, and so that's I'm finding that's happening a lot, where I'm getting a call from a buyer and saying, "Hey, I'm getting ready to make an offer on the house. The house is vacant. The people, moved, and they really need to sell the house. So they're going to either have to take their offer or just carry the house." And that's not everything, but that's it. What I hear you saying is you need a good agent that can call the selling agent to talk to the selling agent to find out what's the story. I like that. What's the story?
Yes, and when you say a good agent, like again, for anybody watching this, I just want you to understand that a majority of the people, if you're represented by somebody that will be making phone calls on your behalf, will not dig in.
Yeah.
They won't, right? They just won't find out what's going on with the seller. Hey, can I show you your property? Sure, okay, great. Thursday, yeah, okay, girl, okay. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all they're getting. They're not, anything you can share with me about the seller, anything going on behind the scenes. Do they have to make anything happen? Like, ask the questions. If a listing agent worth their salt and they're there to take care of their seller, they're going to answer you in different ways that will try to value or build motivation, not by giving things away about the seller, but like encouraging an offer. Even if your seller doesn't want anything to happen from the offer that comes in, just work with an offer. Depending on what's going on with your seller, there might be a change where, you know what, hey, can you call that person that submitted 2 weeks ago that we didn't accept their offer? Things have changed and we're going to have to do that now. Like,
yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Right? Build it up.
Well, you never know all the details. Case in point, I was in a transaction about 2 months ago, and you're frozen, by the way. Your video froze here like this.
Okay, I hear you though. I hope I look good.
So, can you see me here like this?
I hear you. Can you hear me or no?
What happened was the appraisal came in low. They renegotiated the price. At the same time, the buyer had something on her 401k that it was going to be a penalty because she had borrowed before. So she's like, wow. And so she may have had to walk away from the deal. So we communicated with the seller. The seller says, you know what, I'll drop the price down more. As soon as that happened, her father stepped in and said, I can lend you the money. So she got the 2 price reductions, and then she ended up getting some more money. So she ended up in a better place. But the point I'm trying to make with that is that you just got to stick with people, and then things work themselves out. Oftentimes they work themselves out.
Yes. Am I back?
No, you're still frozen. You want to pop out and pop back in? I'm going to kick him out for a few minutes. So I think the thing he's saying is really, really important. So I hope hopefully Stephen will call back in. It's really important. So, what leverage does a buyer have in today's market? Well, the leverage that you have in today's market is not necessarily based on your ability to negotiate, because you're not the one negotiating. You're not the person that's calling the listing agent doing the negotiation. And if you're talking to the listing agent, that listing agent has an agreement with the seller. Let me see, is he back? So the listing agent has an agreement with this. Let me just kick him out really quick so it works out that way. Let me kick from the studio. Okay, so kick him out and he can come back in. So that agent that you're talking to has what they call a listing agreement, and that listing agreement is with the seller. So their fiduciary duty, their duty is to the seller. It's not to you. So they may be giving you information, but their job is to make the seller as much money as they can. So what leverage do you have? Well, your ability to negotiate. You might be pretty good at it. I'm not saying you're not. But if you're working with a really good agent, like I said, Steven said, like somebody that's willing to dig, somebody that's willing to ask the questions that most people aren't willing to ask. So somebody that's not willing to ask the questions that most people are willing to ask. But if you can work with somebody like that, find somebody. And I highly recommend Steven, big time. There's a bunch of agents I work with, Steven included. Great real estate agents. They're brokers. They know what they're doing. And they're going to take the time because this is what they do. This is their profession, is their livelihood. A lot of people are part-timers. There's a lot of people out there that are just part-timers that aren't serious about it, or even people that I worked with. There was an agent that I worked with I probably worked with her for about 12 years. And I can't tell you how many times she would call me in a week to have me do her job for her. She'd say, hey, can you make this call for me? Hey, can you tell me how to do this? How do you do that? It's a lot. And she closed a lot of deals. God bless her. But was she the person that called calmly, professionally? Did she call the listing agents calmly and professionally? No, she would call and create a fight. So a lot of different agents do things different ways. You just got to know, you just got to have the right agent for you, the person that can not only so that you can leverage your position, but so that they can leverage your position. So I think that's really important. So I was kind of reiterating what you were saying. I was talking a little bit about some of the agents I've worked with. One agent in particular, I worked for like 12 years, and she would call me like 3 or 4 times a day, and I would probably have to call her. I would say at minimum 3 or 4 times a week that I would call the listing agents for her because she didn't know how to communicate with them. And it's like she closed a lot of deals. She did a lot of business, but it's just it's just you want to have somebody that is not only can do it but is willing to make the phone calls, because it's not about what the buyer can leverage on their own. It's what the real estate agent, what the realtor, what the broker, what their abilities can leverage.
Correct. It's all about finding out the story. To me, that's the most important piece. Is every single phone call on every single listing right now is going to have a different type of a conversation based on seller necessity and what a listing agent is prepared to say. And you don't always come across great listing agents either, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes a lot of agents aren't even thinking about how they can help their seller sell the property. And I know that sounds bizarre, but I just wish I could say that every industry, everyone in it was awesome.
Yeah. You know what? I agree with you. I got my real estate license July 5th, 1985. It's been a while. As they say, it's been a minute, right? So it's been a while. So I've been in this business for a long time. And I can honestly tell you that in those 30 some odd years that I've been in this business, I may have come across, I'd say at best, 50 real estate agents that I would say, that guy, or realtors or brokers, that one's really, really good. I'm not kidding you.
And that's a shame, right?
Yeah.
But it's like every industry. It's just, I don't know. There's a lot of training that has to go into what we do in any industry, but at the same time, I think we get in our own way and we overthink things as opposed to how do I just be a source for my client and bring them exponential value by doing what I need to do and not worrying about it.
Yeah.
And I think too many agents stop themselves from doing that or asking the hard questions to a listing agent. It's like, hey, market's changed. This property's been on for 120 days already, and I see you've reduced the price some, but not a whole bunch. Like, do the sellers really want to sell? Am I missing something? Right? And then the listing agent could say something like, they just don't want to drop the price, but they'll entertain an offer, right? Yeah. And sometimes the seller will go 50 grand off the asking price, but they didn't want to move their list price. But you wouldn't know that unless you made the phone call.
Well, yeah,
Right.
and so many are saying that so many, and it's in any industry, right? There's so many people say, let's say they're just going to say a phrase, and that phrase cuts off any further conversation. Like they just don't want to drop the price. You're like, all right, forget it then. And they may have had a different thought, but that's what they said. And I can't tell you how many times that I've been in a situation where somebody would say something like that. I go, so what's going on? And then I would just ask, like you said, a couple more questions, right? You just ask a couple more questions, and all of a sudden they say, until next week. They're going to wait till next week. You're like, oh, great. So you told your buyer they wouldn't drop the price. They dropped the price 50,000 the next week. Somebody else buys it, and your buyer's upset with you, and you just didn't stay in the conversation long enough.
It's literally like when I'm talking to a new buyer or a prospect that I'm working to turn into a client, and I'm like, do you have a time frame? Well, it's not for a while. And a lot of people would be like, oh, okay. And I'm like, okay, well, what does a while mean to you? And they're like, oh, next month. I'm like, next month's like tomorrow in real estate. What? Right?
We're there. We're there right now. Yeah. We're there. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, the same thing that happens in any business, that happens in every relationship, is the same thing that we have to overcome in the relationships we have, which is communication and courage. Do you have the courage to stay in a conversation? Are you willing to, like you said, and I wrote it down, said story. Are you willing to listen to the story, to understand the story, and ask enough questions so that you're clear about whatever that story is?
Exactly.
Cool. Let's jump on another call next week, brother.
Next year. Yeah, next week before next year. So
before next year, yeah.
Absolutely. All right, man. See everybody. Happy holidays in the meantime.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Later,
Like
Marty.
and share.